Welcome back to the deep dive. We have a massive stack of documents on the table today, and frankly, we are gonna need every single page.
It feels like it, yeah.
We are tackling a figure who has been described by Time magazine back in 2021 as potentially the most powerful conservative in America.
And that's a title that carries a massive amount of weight. Depending on who you ask, I mean, that's either a lot of hope or, for some people, a lot of fear.
We're talking, of course, about Tucker Swanson McNear Carlson, and our mission today is very specific. We aren't just here to recite a biography or, list a bunch of controversies. We want to trace the very specific, winding, evolutionary path of this man.
Yeah, the trajectory.
The trajectory, exactly. We want to understand how you get from a bow tie wearing magazine writer in the 1990s who, and this is key, was actually liked by a lot of liberals, to the populist firebrand who has, in many ways, completely reshaped the ideology of the Republican Party.
It's a transformation that touches on, everything. You've got the shift from libertarian free market principles to, economic protectionism.
Right.
You've got the paradox of his elite background versus his really strong anti-elite rhetoric. And maybe most fascinating, the tension between his public performance and, well, what we now know were his private beliefs.
It's really a story about the changing landscape of American media as much as it is about one man.
Absolutely.
Exactly. And before we get into the heavy political theory and all that, I found a detail in his personal file that honestly, it just stopped me in my tracks.
Oh, yeah.
It just does not fit the caricature we see on television today. We have to start with this because it frames the complexity of the character. Tucker Carlson is a deadhead.
A serious one, not a casual fan.
No, we are not talking about owning a greatest hits CD or, liking Touch Up Gray. The source material says he has attended over 50 Grateful Dead concerts.
50. That's commitment. That's a lot of touring.
It is a fascinating juxtaposition, isn't it? You have this buttoned-up conservative icon, the face of the right-wing media establishment, and you picture him immersing himself in the ultimate counterculture scene.
It's everything that traditional conservatism usually mocks, right? The whole hippie aesthetic, the drug culture, the wandering improvisational lifestyle.
It's really hard to picture him in a tie-dye shirt spinning in a field, but apparently that was a pretty big part of his life. But it connects to a broader theme in his early timeline because he's admitted to struggling with alcohol during those same years.
And that's a really key part of the timeline. He quit drinking entirely in 2002.
Right. So he's been sober for over 2 decades now.
And that adds this layer of personal discipline to his character that contrasts really sharply with the chaotic sort of gonzo nature of the media environment he grew up in.
That's a good point.
It suggests a man who knows how to control himself, even when the world around him is wild. It creates this interesting tension between, the loose improvisational nature of a dead show and the rigid, disciplined nature of a sober broadcaster.
Okay, so let's go back to the beginning. Let's do the origin story. Because if we really want to understand the worldview, we have to look at where he came from. He was born in San Francisco in 1969.
Which was a very tumultuous time and place. San Francisco in '69 was the epicenter of the counterculture revolution.
But the family dynamic is, it's complicated. His mother, Lisa McNear, was an artist. And the source says she left the family when Tucker was just 6 years old.
And not just, left the house. She moved to France. The source material is very clear on this. Tucker and his brother never saw her again.
Never. That just seems so extreme.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
She was apparently written out of the will, and the contact it ceased. For a 6-year-old boy, that is a foundational trauma.
Oh, absolutely.
Abandonment on that scale, it shapes a person. Some biographers and psychologists who look at his life argue that this could have created a deep-seated need for stability and order.
That makes sense.
And maybe it fueled his later very aggressive defense of the nuclear family. When you lose that structure so young, you might spend the rest of your life trying to protect the very concept of it.
So he's raised by his father, Dick Carlson. And Dick Carlson is a character who, he deserves his own deep dive, frankly. The source calls him a gonzo reporter.
He was. Dick Carlson started in journalism, but had this really impressive, almost Forrest Gump-like trajectory through the halls of power.
What do you mean?
Well, he went from reporting, doing gritty, on-the-ground work, to becoming the director of Voice of America. Then he was the president of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and eventually the U.S. ambassador to the Seychelles.
So Tucker grows up watching this media political hybrid life up close. He's not an outsider. He sees how the sausage is made.
He does. He's in the room. He sees how narratives are constructed, how politics interacts with the press. And then comes the stepmother. In 1979, his father marries Patricia Caroline Swanson.
The Swanson name, the frozen dinner fortune we mentioned earlier?
Exactly. It's iconic.
Yeah.
She was the heiress to the Swanson enterprise. Now, there's a clarification from the source that's important here.
Okay.
The Swansons had actually sold the brand to Campbell's Soup by the time she married Tucker's father. So they didn't own the company anymore.
Got it. So they weren't actively running the frozen food empire.
No, but she was still a beneficiary of that massive family fortune. The money was very much there.
And she adopted Tucker and his brother, right?
She did. So the Swanson name became legally part of his identity. It really solidified his status in the upper crust of society. This is the paradox we talked about. He attacks the ruling class, but he is, by every measure, a product of it.
So you have this upbringing that is, by all accounts, completely elite. He goes to boarding schools?
Yep. La Jolla Country Day, St. George's School in Rhode Island, which is a very prestigious place. He was even briefly at a school in Switzerland, the Collège du Le Mans.
I saw a note on that. He said he was kicked out.
He did. So there's this little rebellious streak there.
A little bit of a rebel early on. And then he goes to Trinity College, graduates in 1991 with a BA in history. And here is the pivot point that I find fascinating. He didn't initially want to be a journalist.
Yeah, not at all.
He applied to the CIA.
He did. He wanted to be a spook.
Can you just imagine?
What?
Agent Carlson. It's a completely different timeline.
Would have been a very different history. But when that door closed, he was denied entry. He turned to his father for advice. And his father, the veteran newsman, gave him some very pragmatic, maybe slightly cynical advice.
Which was?
He encouraged journalism because, and I'm quoting here, that they'll take anybody.
They'll take anybody. That's such a great line. It's so revealing.
It completely demystifies the profession right away. It wasn't about some high-minded calling to, save democracy. It was about finding a job where the barrier to entry was low enough for a history major who just got rejected by the CIA.
So he enters the industry in what we might call the bow tie era. This is section 2 of our breakdown. From about 1995 to 2009, he's a print journalist first.
And a pretty respected one, right? He starts as a fact checker?
Yeah, at Policy Review. Then he writes for the Weekly Standard, Esquire, the New Republic, even the New York Times Magazine. I mean, these are serious publications.
It's so interesting to look back at the reception he got then. Politico noted that during this period, he was viewed as an important voice of the intelligentsia.
Which is a label he would probably torch today. But his writing was sharp, it was witty, and there's a pivotal moment in 1999 that really put him on the map. He did a profile of then-Governor George W. Bush for Talk magazine.
Oh, I remember reading about this. This is the interview where Bush got himself in a lot of trouble, right?
Big trouble. Bush was clearly comfortable with Carlson, maybe a little too comfortable.
Yeah.
They were talking about the death penalty case of Carla Faye Tucker, and Bush mocked her pleas for clemency in the interview, and he used profanity, specifically the F word, quite a bit, and Carlson printed it all.
And the Bush campaign was not happy about that.
They were furious. They claimed Carlson misread him or maybe betrayed the off-the-record nature of the hangout. But what's so interesting is that while it was bad publicity for Bush, it won Carlson a ton of praise from liberals.
Really?
Yeah. They saw him as a brave reporter, someone willing to expose the real Bush, the frat boy persona behind the polished politician.
It's so funny how those dynamics completely flip over time. So from there, he makes the jump to television. And he adopts the signature look.
The bow tie.
The bow tie.
He wore them until 2006. It was his entire brand. He was the young, witty, conservative intellectual. And he lands on CNN's Crossfire in 2001.
Crossfire. Man, that show was a symbol of an era. The whole format was just yelling at each other from the left and the right.
Essentially, yeah. He was representing the right, usually against James Carville or Paul Begala. It was pure political theater. But then came the moment that many people believe effectively ended that show and that version of Tucker Carlson.
Jon Stewart incident.
2004. This is legendary in cable news history. Jon Stewart comes on the show ostensibly to promote a book.
But he had a totally different agenda.
He did not promote the book. He proceeded to just dismantle the entire premise of the show live on air. He accused Crossfire of hurting America. He called them partisan hacks.
I remember watching it. It was incredibly uncomfortable.
And in a moment that is quoted in so many of the source titles, he looked right at Carlson and called him a dick.
On his own show.
On his own show. Carlson tried to laugh it off. He tried to debate him, but Stewart just wasn't playing the game. He was deadly serious. And the fallout was real.
It was.
CNN canceled the show shortly after. Now, Carlson later claimed he had already resigned because he disliked the partisanship, but the timeline, it strongly suggests the Stewart interview was a fatal blow to that format.
So he enters what our outline calls the wilderness years. He's kind of adrift.
He is. He bounces around. He goes to PBS for a show called Tucker Carlson, unfiltered. Then he goes to MSNBC for a show called Tucker.
And this is so ironic. His time slots at MSNBC were eventually taken over by Rachel Maddow and Ed Schultz.
The network was making a hard pivot to the left, and he just didn't fit anymore. His ratings struggled. He couldn't find a footing. He even competed on Dancing with the Stars in 2006.
And he was the first one eliminated.
First one out. It really seemed like his career as a major media figure might just be winding down. He was a guy without a clear home, without a clear brand anymore.
But then the reinvention begins. And this is where we have to look at the ideological shift, because it's profound. The Tucker Carlson of 2005 is not the Tucker Carlson of 2023.
They're not at all. And this is section 3 of our dive, and it's maybe the most important part. The pivot from libertarian to populist.
Right, because for a long time he was a Cato Institute guy.
Yeah. From 2009 to 2015, he was a senior fellow at the Cato Institute, which is the preeminent libertarian think tank in Washington. He supported Ron Paul's presidential bids.
So his economic views were very standard free market Republican at the time.
Totally. Hated nanny state regulations, smoking bans, seatbelts, that kind of thing. He just wanted the government out of the way, let the market work.
But then around 2018, something changes dramatically.
The tone shifts completely. He starts attacking the very libertarianism he used to espouse. He says on his show, and this is a quote, "Market capitalism is not a religion."
That is a huge statement for a prominent conservative pundit to make. It's almost heresy in some circles.
It is. He starts critiquing vulture capitalism. He goes after private equity and hedge funds.
Yeah.
He specifically targets Paul Singer and Mitt Romney's Bain Capital. His argument becomes that any economic system that weakens families, that makes it harder to raise kids on one income is, quote, not worth having.
He even praised Elizabeth Warren's book, The Two-Income Trap.
Which would have been absolutely unthinkable for the bow-tie Tucker of the 2000s. Praising Elizabeth Warren. But this is the rise of the populist Tucker.
So what do you think drove that? Was it a genuine change of heart or a strategic move?
Well, the sources suggest he realized, or maybe just decided, that the base of the Republican Party was no longer interested in corporate tax cuts and deregulation. They were angry. They were angry about cultural and economic displacement.
And this brings us right to the Trumpism connection.
Yeah.
He's often described as a major proponent, maybe even an architect, of Trumpism.
Yes, which our sources define as this blend of anti-immigrant nationalism, economic populism, and foreign policy isolationism. But his relationship with Donald Trump himself is, well, it's incredibly complex.
This is where the private versus public tension really just explodes.
It's the central drama. Publicly, on his show, he defends Trump. He calls the indictments election interference. He's one of his staunchest defenders in the media.
Correct.
Yeah.
But then we have the discovery from the Dominion Voting Systems lawsuit. These were his private text messages, never meant to see the light of day, that were released to the public.
And they paint a completely different picture.
I mean, the texts are brutal, just brutal. He texted, "I hate him passionately," regarding Trump.
Passionately, not just, "I dislike him."
He called him a demonic force and a disaster. I mean, these are not the words of a supporter.
It raises the huge question. Was the on-air support for Trump a genuine ideological alignment with the movement, or was it a commercial necessity because he knew his audience loved Trump and he had to serve them?
And the source material highlights this anti-Trump stance he often took.
Explain that.
Well, he wouldn't necessarily praise Trump's character or his tweets, but he would ferociously, relentlessly attack Trump's enemies in the media and the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
He was pro-Trump by proxy.
So, armed with this new, powerful, populist persona, he lands at Fox News. And this is section 4, the Fox News juggernaut.
He joins Fox in 2009 as just a contributor, but he really takes off in 2016. It's a meteoric rise.
He takes over the 7 p.m. slot, then he moves to 9 p.m. after Megyn Kelly leaves, and finally he gets the prime 8 p.m. slot after Bill O'Reilly is ousted. He inherits the thrones of the network's biggest stars.
And the ratings were just insane.
Historic. He was consistently the highest-rated cable news program in the country. In October of 2020, he had over 5 million viewers a night. He wasn't just a host at that point, he was the anchor of the entire network's identity.
But with those massive ratings came the rhetoric that really defined this era of his career. And specifically, we have to talk about the Great Replacement theory.
This is absolutely crucial to understanding his impact and the controversy around him. The Great Replacement is a theory that claims there is a deliberate plot, usually by Democrats, to import immigrants to change the country's demographics and dilute the voting power of what he calls legacy Americans.
And he didn't just hint at this stuff. He was explicit.
He was. He claimed on his show that immigration makes the country poorer, dirtier, and more divided.
That word dirtier, that specifically drew a lot of heat, a lot of condemnation.
It did. The ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, called for his firing over comments like that. And tragically, the source material notes, this theory was cited in the manifestos of gunmen in mass shootings in Buffalo and El Paso.
Wow.
Now, Carlson, for his part, called any connection between his rhetoric and the violence a hoax, and he denounced the shootings. But the source is clear that he continued to promote the core argument of demographic replacement.
Then we have January 6th.
The aftermath of the 2020 election. Carlson became the primary narrator of a revisionist history of that day for his audience.
He produced a whole series for Fox Nation called Patriot Purge.
Right, which suggested that January 6th might have been a false flag operation.
A false flag. Meaning what, set up by the government?
To entrap conservatives, yeah. He heavily promoted the theory that a protester named Ray Epps was actually a federal agent who was there to instigate the riot, a claim Epps has vehemently denied and for which he demanded a retraction.
And then remember the security footage.
Yes. The new Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, gave him exclusive access to thousands of hours of security tapes from that day.
Which no one else had seen.
And Carlson used that footage to create a new narrative. He cherry-picked clips to portray the QAnon shaman, Jacob Chansley, as just a peaceful observer, sort of wandering calmly through the halls. He tried to reframe the violent chaos of that day as peaceful chaos. It was a bold attempt to rewrite the collective memory of that day for millions of people.
Okay, moving on to Section 5. We have to talk about foreign policy, because his isolationist worldview leads him to some very interesting and, again, very controversial places.
The clearest example here is Russia and Vladimir Putin. And again, you have to look at the evolution. If you go back to the 2000s, Carlson called Putin in league with our enemies. A pretty standard conservative line at the time.
Again, that same pattern of a total shift.
By 2019, he was joking on air, though he later clarified it was a joke, that he was rooting for Russia against Ukraine.
So what's the justification for a pivot like that?
His argument is interesting. He argues that Vladimir Putin doesn't hate America the way he believes American liberals do.
So it's the classic, the enemy of my enemy is my friend logic, but applied to domestic politics instead of international relations.
Exactly. The real enemy, in his view, is the progressive left in the United States, not a dictator overseas. So when the full-scale invasion of Ukraine happened, he initially downplayed the massive troop buildup as just a border dispute. He did call the invasion awful later, but he also heavily promoted Russian narratives and disinformation, specifically about so-called bioweapons labs in Ukraine.
And then he got the interview, February 2024.
He became the first Western journalist to interview Putin since the invasion began. Other journalists and Western governments criticized him heavily for it, arguing he was just giving a platform to an autocrat's propaganda without any meaningful pushback.
But it's not just Putin, is it? He seems to have a kind of affinity for a specific type of strongman leader.
He does. He visited Viktor Orban in Hungary and filmed a whole documentary called Hungary versus Soros, where he praised Orban's hardline anti-immigration policies.
Right.
He praised Nayib Bukele in El Salvador for his brutal crackdowns on gangs, arguing it's effective.
In North Korea. What did the sources say about that?
This is one of the most striking quotes in the entire file. He defended Donald Trump's friendship with Kim Jong-un by arguing that leading a country, and I'm quoting directly, means killing people.
Leading a country means killing people.
It's a level of moral relativism that, again, would have been anathema to the Cold War conservatives of the past. It shows how far his America First isolationism goes, essentially arguing that what dictators do inside their own borders is none of our business, and maybe it's even necessary.
Okay, we are deep in the weeds now. Let's look at Section 6, controversies and what the outline calls the deep end. Because there are some things here that go beyond just political disagreement into stranger territory.
Right. We have to touch on COVID-19. Initially, in February 2020, the sources say he took the virus very seriously. There are even reports he personally influenced Trump to take it more seriously at the beginning.
But that pivot happened fast.
very fast. He became a major skeptic of lockdowns and masks. He famously called forcing children to wear masks child abuse, and he was highly, highly skeptical of the vaccines. He misrepresented data from the VIERS database, which is a system of unverified, self-reported potential side effects, to claim that thousands of people had died from the shot.
He also framed the military's vaccine mandate in a very specific cultural way. He said it was a plot to oust sincere Christians and men with high testosterone from the ranks.
Which ties directly into his broader focus on gender and masculinity. He produced a documentary called The End of Men, which, well, it became famous for featuring a segment on testicle tanning.
I remember the internet just losing its mind over that. It became a huge meme.
It was mocked widely, but it spoke to a core anxiety that he was tapping into. The idea that modern life is stripping men of their masculinity and that traditional masculinity is under attack.
We also have to talk about race again, specifically around George Floyd.
He claimed the massive protests in 2020 were not really about police brutality. He said they were about ideological domination by the left. And then there was those private texts that were revealed in the Dominion lawsuit.
The one about the fight.
Yeah. There was one text where he described watching a video of a group of white men beating an Antifa activist. And he wrote, "It's not how white men fight."
That text reportedly set off major alarm bells at the highest levels of Fox News.
It did. The sources say it deeply disturbed the executives. It suggested a racialized view of violence that was very hard to defend, even for a network that is known for pushing the envelope.
And recently, he seems to be pushing even further into what the outline calls historical revisionism.
This is very recent, from September 2024. He hosted a self-described historian named Daryl Cooper on his show. Cooper called Winston Churchill the chief villain of World War II and claimed that the Holocaust was not an intentional policy on the part of the Nazis.
That is startling. That's not just revisionism.
It was immediately and widely condemned. The White House, Jewish leaders, other historians, they called it Nazi propaganda. It marks a shift from populist conservatism into something much darker and more fringe.
And speaking of fringe, the source mentions demons.
Yes. In 2024, Carlson claimed on a podcast that he was once mauled by a demon in his bed while he was sleeping. He said it left him bleeding.
Mauled by a demon.
And in a separate instance, he claimed that nuclear technology was not invented by humans, but was actually created by demons and given to mankind.
So we have gone from debating tax policy at the Cato Institute to demon attacks and demonic nuclear technology.
It is quite the trajectory.
Which leads us, I guess, to the inevitable conclusion of his time at Fox. Section 7, the firing, April 2023.
It was a bombshell. Nobody saw it coming. He was fired just days after Fox News settled that massive Dominion voting systems lawsuit for nearly $800 million.
$787.5 million, to be exact. A lot of money.
It is. And while Fox never gave a specific official reason, reports from multiple sources suggest it was a perfect storm of factors.
So it wasn't just one thing.
No, it was a mix of the cost of that lawsuit, the private text where he criticized Fox management using very vulgar and offensive language, that white men fight text we just talked about, and a toxic work environment lawsuit filed against him by one of his producers, Abby Grossberg. It all just became too much.
But he didn't disappear. Not for a second.
No. Within weeks, he launched Tucker on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, and later the Tucker Carlson Network, his own streaming service.
And he proved he could still command a massive audience. He counter-programmed the first GOP presidential debate by airing an interview with Donald Trump on X.
And it got massive views. Hundreds of millions, according to the platform's metrics. It showed he was arguably just as influential, maybe even more so, without the constraints of a corporate cable slot.
He's totally untethered now. No corporate executives, no advertisers to worry about in the same way.
And of course, there's always the speculation about a presidential run.
2024, or maybe 2028, it always comes up.
He always says he wouldn't be good at it, that he doesn't have the right temperament. But in the world of modern populism, the line between pundit and politician has become very, very thin.
So, after all this, what does it all mean? We've looked at the facts. We've traced the history.
I think what we're left with is that Tucker Carlson is a figure of massive contradictions. He's a media insider who leads the anti-establishment charge. He's a wealthy patrician heir who champions the working class. And he's a man who privately, passionately mocked the very political figures he publicly defended.
It really makes you wonder about the nature of truth in media today and performance.
That is the final thought I think we need to leave you with. When you look at this entire trajectory from a voice of the intelligentsia writing for New York Magazine to a podcaster discussing demons and Holocaust revisionism, you have to ask, is this a calculated commercial evolution? Is he just a brilliant broadcaster giving an audience what he knows they want to hear?
Or is it a genuine ideological radicalization? Has he come to believe all of it, from the replacement theory to the demons?
And maybe the bigger question for all of us is, in an era where media is so fragmented, so personalized, does the truth even matter more than the narrative you choose to believe?
That is the question Tucker Carlson's career forces us all to ask.
We've laid out what the sources say. As always, we encourage you to look at them yourself, read the articles, watch the clips, and decide for yourself.
Thanks for diving deep with us.
See you next time.